All right. Hi, everybody. This is Nayeli from the Astro Read. And on the Astro Read today, we have our first ever interview guest, Trish Campbell. And I'm so excited to interview her today, or really more chat with her. We're going to have this as really a laid back chat to really get to know all the great work that Trish does. As a side note, co-host Stella, unfortunately, will not be part of this episode because she is feeling under the weather, and it is a Pisces moon on the day of this recording, September 19th. So it totally makes sense. And she needs her TLC, but she sends her regrets to the audience for not being able to make it today. But, you know, her health comes first, and we are all excited to have her back for the next episodes once she's back up and running. But, you know, we didn't want to miss this opportunity to get to interview Trish, especially with all the great things that she's been doing lately, and, you know, her upcoming book that's will be released later on this year. So as a little intro to Trish is the founder of INVIBE, which is a brand that's really all about healing, but I'll let Trish really explain Vibe in more detail in a bit. But amongst the different things that Trish does, she is a Reiki practitioner. She is the co-host of this great podcast called The Shift, which we'll talk more about later on. And she is also the author of her upcoming book that's going to be called Love Me, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on as well. And she does so much more, but it's really all under the umbrella of her brand INVIBE. And I guess to start off, Trish, could you describe, you know, how you created INVIBE and, you know, what was the purpose of this brand and really this offering for people?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm so excited, and just to have this conversation and talk about all the things. But yeah, so INVIBE, I started in 2015, and just to back up, I had a 20-year career in the corporate world in sales and marketing, and found myself unfulfilled. On the outwardly, I looked successful, had everything, you know, checked all the boxes, and I literally lived my life that way, checking all the boxes and making sure I was like on the path, or the path I thought I should take. So I created INVIBE as I stepped away from the corporate world, or rather was kind of spit out. But I feel like I called that in. And yeah, INVIBE is really about the brand name itself is about, it represents the vibration that we all are. And the in part is going inward and healing. So I think I was like ahead of myself in it, you know, when I created the brand name, of knowing how big that umbrella would be for the work that I was going to be doing in the future. So intuitive. So it is all about intuition-based living and healing. And it started with life coaching, and then I became a Reiki practitioner, then a Reiki master teacher. And so I incorporate the Reiki work in with the healing, because the Reiki is all about, well, it's energy healing. And if you're not familiar with that and how it works, just briefly, everything is energy, and our bodies hold energy. Our bodies are energy. Energy flows through us, but over the years, we store energy in our bodies, and we store negative energy and heavy energy of experiences that are either like trauma, or just unpleasant experiences that we go through in our lives, that we don't even realize. Like, we may say, oh, I just kind of blew that off, but we don't realize maybe it did impact us. And so we kind of tuck it away somewhere in our body, and eventually, and we think we can just keep going, and I'm okay, and I don't need to acknowledge this. And then eventually we get like literally weighed down with holding all of this, and not even really understanding that's what it is that's blocking us from opening up to our potential. So INVIBE is really about helping people kind of untangle themselves from conditioning and the ways they think they should be living their lives. And because I know a lot of people express a lack of fulfillment, not knowing what their purpose is. So I help people through the steps of that, taking like one step at a time. And part of that is the Reiki healing. And then we go from there. That will help release things and emotions, feelings to come up, to process and work through and sort through, and then grow from eventually. So that is how I started INVIBE, and it's evolved over the years. I've kind of went back into the corporate world, and then again, like intuitively, I knew right away, I was like, this is not the work I'm supposed to be doing. So again, I found myself back recreating the work that I do. And it's kind of, it's taken off from there. And now while it's uncomfortable to step into something that's uncertain and it's not, I don't know what it looks like. It is definitely more fulfilling. I mean, I'm the happiest I've ever been because I'm in a freer place. I'm not bound by, I don't have somebody looking over my shoulder, like what the work that I'm doing, it's, all intuitively guided. So, I mean, there's so many things I could say about it, but it's just, I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity and the awareness to take this path. So, and here we are talking about it. So
yeah, it comes full circle. And I'm sure the people that have been helped by the services that you provide through INVIBE are probably very grateful as well. So, what I'm gathering from what you described is, two major themes of the work that you do in INVIBE is, energy work, in a sense, kind of redirecting energy, and then also helping people live authentic lives, be their true selves, or process any repressed energy or emotions that they thought had been done away with or managed when it's really just buried within them. So yeah, that's really important work for sure. And, in your chart, when I had looked at your chart, I noticed multiple components, show your psychic abilities. And in particular, they show that your psychic ability relates to regeneration, helping with energy, because the air element is very strong in your chart. And then when you combine that with your psychic abilities that are shown in your chart, putting that together, it shows that you could be very good at helping people heal, helping people redirect their energy, or even sometimes like feeling other people's energy. Is that something that you encounter where you can feel somebody's energy, especially when you're doing your Reiki work?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because yes, I can do, and it's getting stronger and stronger. It's so interesting we're talking about this because growing up, I never really felt that. I always, we hear these things inside of us and we want to, those little nudges, and sometimes we ignore it. And what I've come to learn is like not listening to those. Sometimes it ended up back for most of the time. I should have just listened to that inner voice. And now I feel I'm so sensitive to energies. And it's also interesting because I grew up being told I was sensitive, like I was too sensitive. Hypersensitive, I've been described as, and through my healing and kind of like flipping the script on that, I've taken that as my superpower. Like, and that really is, it's so interesting that shows up in my chart as like potential, because I feel like I'm tapping into that now more and more these last few years as I've been going on this more intuitively guided path. It may not look like it's the most stable we kind of think we have to have, I mean, we do want stability in our lives, but, I was always somebody who didn't want to do the wrong thing and wrong according to what society was. So, anyways, I just feel like that reading energies, like I can feel the energy in a room. I can sense like a shift in energy, working with people like doing Reiki. The good thing about energy work is, or the interesting thing, especially in these times when we can't always get together physically, is energy isn't bound by time or space. So I work from a distance, and anyone who knows Reiki or any kind of energy healing work, they know you can do this from a distance. And it's really interesting if you've ever done it before to be on the receiving end of it, because you do feel that. And when I'm working with a client, I can sense things, I can sense the blockages, I can, and I give them that feedback, and they're like, this is what I felt on my end. And we validate each other's, like, what's going on. So it's so interesting how, so many people don't, know that this is available to them, because this is a tool. We have everything inside of us that we need to help ourselves. And this is one of the things. So yeah, that's a big part of, or I'm a big proponent of just exploring all the things, the parts about ourselves that we've kept hidden because we thought we had to be somebody to be accepted. So, I mean, that's been my journey and awakening up to that. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I can attest as to your Reiki abilities because I've taken part in at least a couple of your virtual Reiki sessions whenever you've done the group sessions.
Yeah.
And I always feel relaxed, you know, after the session, or like some energy has been released that was blocked within myself. And yeah, I've taken part in them virtually, you know, during the height of the pandemic when you were mostly offering it that way because of social distancing. And yeah, I felt the effects. And then looking at your chart, you know, I realized, oh, wow, you were meant to do this work. I'll try to put your chart at the description of this episode if I can. But one of the interesting things about your chart, which there's lots, is that your planets, they're all pretty much all but one of them are on one side of your chart. And then you've got one lone planet that's by itself on the other side. And it's Neptune in Scorpio in your third house. So usually, and this shape of the chart is called the bucket shape, because you've got pretty much like your pail, like the actual bucket, which is all your planets. And then all by itself is the handle. And in your chart, your handle is Neptune in Scorpio in the third house. So Neptune in Scorpio, that is a placement right there that indicates psychic ability, because Neptune is a very nebulous planet. It indicates what's underneath. A lot of times it could indicate spiritual, creative, or psychic ability. And then Scorpio itself is a very deep sign, very much hidden what's underneath as well. And then you have this, you know, planet of Neptune in the sign of Scorpio in the third house, which the third house is all about communication and thought process. So it's almost like your drive for tapping into your psychic ability and helping others tap into their abilities as well is something that probably drives you. And you probably are able to do this through some sort of communication, whether it's the Reiki work that you do, or, you know, the work that you're doing now in, you know, being an author and being involved in media, you know, with your upcoming book and with the shift. So that drives you. So regardless of what you've encountered in your life or what you have felt that you needed to do, at the end of the day, that Neptune and Scorpio in the third house, that's been driving you all along.
That's so interesting. Like I'm lighting up right now because like it really is, it's been a journey of, you know, I think my spiritual awakening started happening probably like 10 or 12 years ago. But when I stepped away from the corporate world and took the risk and with a little like walking through that fear and then opening up to this, like I really feel as I go deeper and deeper into this, like I'm coming into the place that I was meant to be in, where I was meant to do like my real work. So it's just, so as you say, like communication, because I feel like communication is like my life. Like, well, I'm Gemini, so Mercury ruled, and then Virgo ascendant, so also like so double Mercury, and it's all the different ways of communication. And I've even brought that into INVIBE and helping kind of pivot it a little bit in doing communication, helping others communicate their messages authentically. And you know, in the same group that's come up with being a part of this media group that I'm in, and everything is about that right now, like just communicating. And the writing is that's another form of the healing work, is like for me, writing is healing. So, and I'm also applying that in the work that I do forward. I have some projects in the work. So yeah, it's like so interesting that you bring that up and how that potential is there. So it's like, I mean, I probably knew that I had this potential. I think we all know we come in with things and then we kind of forget as we go through life. So
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And Mercury is definitely your strongest planet out of all the planets in your chart. So communication is big with you. And like you mentioned, your Gemini sun, and then your Virgo rising, and then your midheaven is in Gemini. So for those that are not familiar with the midheaven is that solid line that's, at the top of somebody's chart. And it indicates what type of careers might be the best fit for somebody, and also career tendencies. So, Trish, with your midheaven being in Gemini, as far as the work that you do in society, you're going to be drawn to do things that involve communicating a message or communication. So it's like, no matter what you do, like communication is something you're going to be drawn to do. And I agree with you. I think everybody knows, everybody has those gut feelings. Everybody knows inside of themselves what they're meant to do. I think the challenge is bringing it out and living in that truth in the world, living that truth in the boundaries and in the reality that people are in. And I think that's why it's so great that there's people out there like yourself that are helping people find their truest selves. And you, Trish, you do that through INVIBE. I do that through Astronatic and really focusing on the astrology piece. And I think, there's individuals out there in the world that do this kind of work where they're helping people become their most authentic selves, because it's like we all have that inside of ourselves, whether it's energy or an inner knowing or a talent. But sometimes it could be hard to bring it out. And I feel like we both have encountered that in our own lives. Like Trish, with your journey, you said you came from the corporate world and you always had that inkling of, having a certain type of sensitivity, being able to feel energy, wanting to help people, become their most authentic selves. And it took time for you to get more and more involved in that work and step less and less, kind of away from the corporate world. But at the end of the day, it's sort of like you're navigating both now in a sense, kind of a little bit of both. And that journey of you shifting more into your spiritual work, but still having those ties to, your corporate past and those skills that you have reminds me a lot of your North Node and your North Node journey. So your North Node is in Pisces in the sixth house, which is a very interesting placement because Pisces and the sixth house tend to not really go together. But kind of signify your balance, right? So Pisces is similar to Neptune in that Pisces is a very nebulous sign. Pisces relates to spirituality, self-sacrifice, artistry, what's underneath. It's about all of those things. Pisces is a water sign, so it relates to sensitivity, a lot of times psychic sensitivity. And then the sixth house is all about structure and order. And the sixth house, so the sixth house relates to work, to health. It's sometimes pets, but the sixth house in a nutshell really relates to the structures that we have in our life to keep things in order. And the sign that's usually associated with the sixth house is Virgo. And Virgo is a sign that's very much the same way, having things in a certain order, in a system. And Pisces is very different from the sixth house. Pisces is all about going with the flow, going where the energy's going. I mean, I've known a few Pisces in my day, and they tend to not be very structured. They're very much like life will happen the way it's meant to. Like they're the best at surrendering to the universe, right? So, the thing with the North Node is, the North Node usually involves a lesson or certain attributes that somebody would need to take on for their souls to evolve. And that's how I interpret it. Different astrologers will interpret the North Node in their own way, but that's my interpretation. Like the qualities that somebody would have to take on for their souls to evolve. And usually somebody's North Node will be placed somewhere where the qualities would be really difficult for the person to take on, or would seem kind of like they would have to stretch out of their comfort zone or stretch out of the confines that their life has been in. So in your case, with your North Node being in Pisces in the sixth house, you've had that, if I were to interpret it, it would be taking on the Pisces-like qualities of surrendering to the universe, tapping into your spirituality and artistic abilities and creativity, and doing that in your everyday life and doing that in the world of work. So that to me is the interpretation of a North Node being in Pisces in the 6th house. And then on the flip side, the South Node, which is always opposite the North Node, the South Node represents your comfort zone, like who you were in a past life, the qualities that you're born with. So, with the North Node being in Pisces in the 6th house, that means your South Node is reversed. So your South Node is in Virgo, the sign opposite to Pisces, in the 12th house. So that could mean that your comfort zone or what the qualities you were born with were very much about being structured and orderly and regimented about how you viewed your life going, or how you viewed your spirituality and your creativity. And I guess over time and in your soul evolution, you probably have been drawn to flip the script and be more, in surrender to how you approach your everyday life and your work. So I'm wondering if that resonates with you at all.
It does. Like, as you're saying this, I'm like, I literally have lived my South Node to North Node journey, or I'm living that. Like, I feel like the first part of my life has been about structure and following the steps that we're supposed to take, like following, like, as we were talking before, I think back to high school, and like, all of us had these dreams, and then, the people around us kind of say, are you sure you want to do that? Because you might not be, you want to make sure you can sustain a living and all these things. So then we start to shape ourselves to, walk a different path. And then we like abandon those things about ourselves that were our unique gifts that were meant to be shared. So I feel like, as I've taken that journey and checked all the boxes, like I say, and walked that path, and then had an awakening around that, which was kind of like a gradual at times, and then kind of a rude awakening. But I feel like I've made that, like, flip that script, like you said. And everything about my life is about surrendering and surrendering to the universe, like following the signs that I'm given, sharing the gifts, like everything, the communication is one thing. I've like tapped back into the art that I used to want to do. And I kind of set that aside in my life. So I've been creating a lot of art. Acrylic on canvas is like what I play with now, but I mean, just everything. I feel like everything in my life, like cooking, for example, like that has become an art for me. So it's like there's all these things that have been that I've kind of gradually been opening up to, that I never used to before. Now that I'm on this, like I feel like I'm on the path that I was meant to be, and doing this work more and more all the time that I was meant to be doing. So it's just so interesting how I mean, I know they always say like our chart isn't exactly how things are supposed to go, but it's the potential. And I feel like I'm, trying to reach for that potential, which is good. So,
it's really good, because not everybody gets the chance to do it, or not everybody ends up, getting the bravery, in my opinion, that's needed to do it, or gets the opportunity, right? Because it can be challenging to live more and more in your truth, and live more and more in the potential of your natal chart. And I've seen some of your paintings, and you have an Instagram account, I think, for that as well. I think it's called Inside Out or something. So I'll try to put that in the description as well, because your work is really beautiful, and it follows this theme. I feel like whenever I see a painting of yours, I know it's yours. Like you have a certain style, certain color schemes that you've been using lately. And I see your cooking on Instagram all the time. Maybe that'll be your next book, like a cookbook, recipes for healing, because the recipes you come up with, and it could be like an offshoot of how people can, maintain and heal their energy and all of that, you know, through the food that they eat and through the recipes that they follow or make. So yeah, you're just this creative being, and you have all these different outlets of how you showcase your creativity, but also help people with their healing and their energy, whether it's through your paintings or your food or Reiki, or, you know, the media outlets that you're involved in as well.
And I feel like you just said the word creativity, and I feel like that is like a key to like the healing too that we all go through. I think that is so, there's so many avenues or channels of that, but I feel like, yeah, that, not to steer this in another direction, but I just feel like that is something that you know, encourage people to tap into themselves. Like that shows up in so many different ways. And it is such a healing tool that we have that we don't even think of as like something we would reach for when we need healing or we need to come back to ourselves. But that is something that I have done on my own journey and invite my clients to do that too. It's like, do what makes you feel good. So it's simple. It's simple. It's So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I think for a lot of people out there, using their creativity is a way to get healing. And I've seen that in some individuals' charts where it shows that creativity is really something that they need to tap into, you know, for their own healing or to maintain their emotional equilibrium. So it can be not only helpful for a lot of people, but sometimes necessary to maintain this healed state of being or to maintain some sort of balance. So yeah, it's interesting that that's something that you've seen in your own life and seen with probably the people that you've helped as well. And an interesting thing that you mentioned before is that with the work that you do now compared to when you were in the corporate world, you mentioned something along the lines of you don't have somebody, you know, like breathing down your neck, like trying, you know, just seeing, you know, what you're doing. What do you mean by that? Can you tell me, can you share more about that?
I guess it's just because probably my later experiences in the corporate world were attempts at micromanaging. And it's the more seasoned I got at the work I did, the more senior I got, the more micromanaging I experienced, which I feel like that when we feel like we're boxed in, it's not a good feeling. And it's almost like it's there to, you know, as I'm thinking about it now, it was there to teach, you know, to kind of like be a message to me. Like, is this what you want? Is this what, you know, it's kind of like mirroring back the life that I created, or like just like that feeling of boxed in and need, you know, I think the universe again shows us. And so different examples, and sometimes we don't pay attention to what those things are. So that experience kind of just made me realize that I had like walked down this path for somebody else, for not for anyone in particular, but just because that's what I thought was expected of me from society. And then, you know, there might have been multiple signs and symbols and signals and messages and all these things coming in that I ignored because I was just busy like trying to complete the next step and not really tuning inward. And it wasn't until I was invited back to that that I started to realize like how I got there. So, and that's where really like where I when I started to write the book, or where that inspiration came from. So it's so interesting how it all led to that. But
yeah, it's interesting. You know, sometimes you have to go back to situations or connect with individuals to remind you of who you used to be, to kind of see your evolution and see, oh, I don't really identify with this anymore. And so some people, I think, feel when they get into those situations that it means that they've done something wrong or that they're taking steps backwards. But sometimes you kind of have to go backwards, whether it's, you know, encountering somebody that you don't really see eye to eye with because they show characteristics that you don't identify with anymore, or going back to a setting, whether it's a past, you know, work environment or whatever else, going back to a past setting, and then realizing, oh, this doesn't really match where I'm at now. And so I think some people, they look at that as, oh, you're going backwards, or, you know, this isn't good. But, you know, I think it can be a good thing, because sometimes you have to go back
Yeah.
to have a new perspective to then move forward. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's just how life goes sometimes.
I think for me, it was like, okay, I didn't get it the first time. I needed to say,
Yeah.
you need another taste of this, Trish. Like, so that, and then I was like, okay. Immediately when I went back, I was like, yeah, I remember why I wasn't in this world for a while. So it is interesting, but and that's what has made me open up more to watching for the universe kind of signaling to me when something's good, and when something's not good, and then also feeling the energy of it
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting more and more into that because of years of not doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, I think that's why work, whether it's Reiki work, energy work, astrology, why it can be so helpful for people, because it can help people understand why their lives are happening a certain way. And I think that's definitely how I use astrology to help people understand why has their lives gone on a different way. I know it's helped me in that way, in understanding, well, why has my life been this way? I don't understand. And astrology has been the way to help me understand, because you bring up a good point that life will show you where you're meant to go, or will teach you certain lessons. So if you're catapulted out of a certain job, it could be very easy to think like, oh, I failed, right? But
Right.
sometimes most times there's a bigger picture of, okay, you were catapulted out of a job because you were meant to be redirected. So, okay, you're out of this job now. What now? Like, how can you be your most authentic self in that moment? How can you rewrite your story? And I think a lot of people don't really have that perspective, because we live in a world of, you're supposed to do this and you're supposed to do that. And I think in our society, we see failure as a certain way. And, it takes exploring different ways of being, or different philosophies out there, to see that, there's no true failure per se. It's just all redirection, lessons learned, ways that we can be better, ways that we can be more authentic.
Right. I 100% agree with that. I think that failure is essential to success. Like, we need failures are the learnings. That's where the wisdom is. That's where, like, society is the one that says failure is a bad thing, but it's actually like, anyone who's successful knows failure well. And I have to tell myself that, because like it is hard to fail. We don't want to fail, because we associate that with like something's wrong with us. And it's not that there's something wrong with us. We're human, and we're meant to take those steps and to maybe make a mistake or fail, and then, to be redirected, learn from it, and then be redirected. So that for me has been huge too. And I think it's whether it's relationship or it's your job, a breakup, you get let go, or anything like that, like any kind of your business fails. I mean, it's just more learning for the next chapter. And like you said so perfectly, we can rewrite our story. And that's one of the messages of like that I talk about in my book. That's the story. That's what I talk about in the work that I do, and how I communicate to people. Like, we have the choice to rewrite it at any point, right now, tomorrow, next week, whenever. We don't have to carry whatever is it's good to explore what's happened, how we got here. I mean, that's important. But I think in astrology has helped me do that too. Like you have helped me with your charts that you have read for me. And I think that it is such an important tool that has been kind of like on the fringe of what is available to us, and not out there in mainstream, because there's so much wisdom in it. It's just like, even Reiki, or all these ancient wisdoms that are kind of buried, because it does make us more intelligent and more in tune with ourselves. And there's a reason for that, like, because the system doesn't want us to be like that. But I mean, and I think the more and more we tap into who we are, and the more and more we're, taking ownership of our own healing, and taking those steps away from what the expectations of society are, the more we kind of like on an individual level, we do that work, but we change collectively. So, I mean, and if anything, we've seen what's kind of a state we're in these last like year and a half, 2 years. And what, we kind of been forced to do that on some level, to look at our lives, go inward, what's important, take take inventory on what is important in our lives and our values and belief systems and all of that. So yeah, I'm just curious what else you have that stands out in my chart. And I think there was something I saw in what was it? Or maybe it was just about maybe I just want to know about, like, in general, like near future. I don't know if you want to talk about that kind of thing, like what's coming up, or around career, love, all the things that everyone asks about.
Well, that could be for like another episode to see how everything's going to affect your love.
Yeah.
But on the topic of love, let's dive into that. So you had mentioned that when you went back into the corporate world, that experience and realizing that really wasn't, a fit for you or kind of your environment, that was what led to the beginnings of you starting to write your upcoming book, Love Me, which is so interesting. So yeah, I think through that, we'll be able to dive into some of your relationship tendencies and all of that. But how was that journey like of deciding to write Love Me? And I know you've mentioned to me in other conversations that, it's taken a bit longer to finish just because all these other things happened in your life that you felt really were informing how you needed to complete the book or, finish up the book. So let's talk more about that and tell us more about, the journey of writing Love Me, because I'm so excited to read this book once it comes out. Yeah.
I forgot. So, that book I started actually writing. It wasn't, it was because I was using writing as a tool for healing, again, like I mentioned before. And I started writing poetry after I had a major breakup in my life. And it was kind of forcing me to, see what my part in that was, like how I got to where I was, why I showed up a certain way. I really wanted to, I could have just like blamed the other person and said, like we do a lot of the times. And so, but I really wanted to get to the truth of who I am and how I got to what, just face it. It's not always pretty. Like I know a lot of people say, I just want it fixed and I just want to be like, go from here to here, but you have to do the stuff in between. And I was willing to do that. And it was a process. And so I started writing poetry and I found that was a way for my feelings to come out. And I always wanted to write a book. Like when I was in high school, I just thought, like, what would it be like to be a published author? And but I thought, that's for somebody else. That's not for me. And kind of buried that. And so through the process, then I went on a retreat. I kind of took a leap of faith and booked this writing retreat that I didn't even have like vacation time for. I didn't have the money to pay for it. And I just truly believe that when you make a step like that, like that the universe opens up and provides. And this was an experience in that, or an example in that. And so things like moved out of the way and made, it happened. And I had deep healing. It was more of a healing retreat than a writing retreat, because it was like to unblock us. And from there, I started, it wasn't just, I decided it wasn't going to be poetry. It was going to be poetry and insights of to kind of weave in between the poetry. And so that process of writing that happened just like within the last year. Like I started just over a year ago writing that part of the book and weaving that in with the poetry. And so I really feel good about having a unique piece of work that's poetry and it's insights and it's sharing my story, sharing like what the awakening was, going back to my childhood trauma, understanding how I showed up the way I was showing up. And I realized I was living my life for other people. And it's not that I was like fake or inauthentic in my being on a daily basis. It was just that going back to my childhood, my number one goal as a child was to be good, quote unquote good. And so then as I grew that, and then I became almost like I talk about it in my book too, about like feeling invisible. And so that, translated into adulthood, into some people pleasing. And I think a lot of us have there's a lot of people that have tendencies or can relate to that. And it's about, because we feel like society sets this like bar for what is good, like what success looks like, and it looks one way, and like, you know, you have to do all these things in this order, and that's what I did. And then, you know, I did all that. I, you know, got married, had kids, got, you know, got my degree first, all, you know, all the things. And then it was like, okay, then what?
Mm-hmm.
And so having that moment of when I had that breakup, it was like, okay, let's just pause for a minute and see what's going on underneath. And so really, that book is about, and it's called Love Me, because love me is both, that phrase is both, I feel like, a plea for the first part of my life, and then a declaration for the second half of my life. So it's like, and it's, I love me, it's my journey of self-love. And really, you know, I think we kind of, or at least for my, I'll speak for myself, kidded myself that, or pretended that I love myself, or, you know, said, oh, this, you know, I love myself, I'm, you know, but it's like, I really didn't understand what that meant. And I really felt, and I really got it, that if you don't love yourself first, how can anybody love you? If you don't understand what your needs are, how can anybody else, how can you communicate them? How can you, for me, I was just expecting people to understand what my needs were, and not really saying I need this, or not standing firm in who I was. So it really brought me back to myself and opened me up to who I am, and understanding who I am, and reconnecting with myself and remembering who I was. And so I feel like when we do that, at least for myself, like my relationships have, you know, improved, because I think when you can communicate what you need, it's like so powerful, and it opens up the space for the other person to do that too. And by ripple effect, like then collectively, it has a positive impact. So I just think that, yeah, I just am so excited to share this story. I know the people will find parallels to their own lives, and that's what I kind of invite the reader to do. That it's my story, but I'm sure there's parallels for people. And so, yeah, that's why I wanted to share some insights along with the poetry to kind of create a bigger picture, a bigger piece of art, I guess. So yeah, I'm excited to put it out there, and for people to read it. And I feel like this is just the beginning, because I have like other things, there's other things attached to that that will come after that, to Love Me. But then there's other projects too that I'm already working on, but I'm like, okay, I need to do that in 2022. I need to start, you know, I'm good at starting things, but finishing them is like a challenge. So I'm getting
that's your strong Gemini, wanting to do all these different things, and you know, and like getting scattered. I can relate to that. I don't think I have a strong Gemini in my chart, but I can relate to being able to start things but not really finish. I think that's my strong air element in my chart. So yeah, I'm excited to see not only Love Me once it comes out, but what ends up coming after that. So by that, do you mean, and I don't know if this is secret information that we can't have yet, but do you mean like sequels to Love Me, like additional books, or is it just a whole other thing that would be related to Love Me?
Well, I don't know about a sequel. There may be that, but it's more, I'm going to have a book just of poetry, but there'll be additional poetry in that. And then there's something else that's coming, but I don't really want to share that yet. But it's tied in. We'll just say that it's tied in with my artwork.
Okay.
I'm doing. So, and Love Me, it'll all be tied. I'm going to wrap it all together. So, so yeah, and then there's some other, I'm working on a children's book.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah. So, and it's, that is also, there's an astrological tie to that.
Oh, then we need to talk about that, because I'm thinking of something.
I should say a planetary tie to that, but
okay, we need to talk then. That'll be like an off episode conversation, because I'm thinking
so excited because this is what I mean by everything opening up. Like once, you know, it is hard to step into something that's uncertain, but I feel like, and don't get me wrong, like, you know, I was living the life, I had, you know, a 6-figure job, everything, you know, taken care of and all that. And my life, maybe from that perspective, you know, I had to make adjustments, and I found out what was really important to, you know, living and my well-being, and living a more simple life. and also considering, our planet, not like my, everything is kind of shifted in my life, and what's important, living in gratitude, and all the like all the things that make the experience a much more richer experience in all the ways, not just financially.
Yeah,
yeah, I'm
absolutely.
excited to create in all the different ways, and it's putting this piece, pushing the button on this this project, the Love Me. And like you said, you had mentioned that there was something that had come up like recently for me, that I'm in my third edit, but something came up healing wise that was was from a thing that was too, I didn't realize that this was beneath one of my childhood wounds. So I needed to go back to it, and I need to incorporate that into the story, because it is an example of how our healing is never finished.
Yep.
And we always, I relate to it as a spiral, like, and I know a lot of people do, we always come back around for another view. And it's like, so we've seen, certain parts of it, but we need to see another side of it. And we're continuing to do that. So there may be more to be uncovered after this, but this was a huge piece that I hadn't considered, and I needed to incorporate that. So at some point, like, and I think a lot of writers experience that, like, when do you cut it off? Because the inspiration is always flowing, but it's kind of like, I mean, I knew it was finished, but I needed to incorporate this. But even like with my artwork, I know you just kind of know that it's complete. So it is now, it's like the final editing, which is, and I'm self-publishing, so it's a process and a learning process in and of itself. But
yeah, it's so exciting. And so Love Me, it seems like it's going to be a very unique book as far as its structure, because it has poetry and insights. And by the insights, is it more like you sharing your advice, or is it more like questions to the reader for them to reflect on, or is it something else entirely?
It's kind of a combination of both. I do, like, at times say, ask the reader a question to invite them into the story, and it's more me just kind of laying out how things unfolded. And like my first chapter is about grief, because grief is what brought me to write this book, and in that grief and the different types of grief, and so then it goes on from there, and just like you see the evolution of the story. So I'm really excited to share it. And yeah, and I did the artwork for the cover and all, like, it's just like, it's my baby.
It's all you. It's all you. Self-published, self-illustrated with, the beautiful cover, which I'll try to include a picture or a link to it in the description of the episode. But, I've seen the cover of the book, obviously, because I follow you. Do you have it with you? Because it is a beautiful cover. It is beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was all you. That was all you. And again, it kind of goes along with the themes of what your artwork has been lately. You could just tell when a piece of artwork is one of your creations. But it's interesting that Love Me starts with grief, because, when I think of Love Me and what you've mentioned here in this episode, and in other conversations we've had about your journey in completing this book and getting it started, it reminds me a lot of your Chiron and your internal wounds. So Chiron, for those that are not familiar with Chiron, it's an asteroid that is on one's natal chart, and it signifies where one would have their internal emotional wounds. So everybody has internal wounds. Some people ask me, oh my gosh, why do I have an internal wounds? It's like, we all do. We all are born with internal wounds. They're just different for each person. But Trish, your Chiron is in Aries in the 7th house of relationships. So that's really interesting, because Aries, it's the first sign of the zodiac. It's all about being assertive, being an individual, just the self, really. Aries is really all about being assertive, being oneself, being independent. But then your Chiron is in that sign, but then also in the 7th house of relationships and relating to others. So again, I feel like your Chiron requires this balance of having this sense of yourself, but also being able to relate to another in relationships. So, based on that, I find it so fitting that you've written this book, Love Me. And I think you're well equipped to be able to provide insight to those that read Love Me and those that are looking for healing in how they relate to themselves and relate to others. Because the thing with Chiron is, not only does its location signify where one has their internal wound, but it also shows where one can teach others, right? Because how can you teach others how to heal in a certain area if you've never really felt the pain in that area to begin with, right? So by you having gone through these hardships and relationships, and in your relationship to yourself, not only has that been something that you've had to heal from and continue to heal from, because like you said, the healing never ends, it runs in a spiral, but it also makes you so well equipped to teach others how to do that specific kind of healing because you've been through it, right? You've been in the trenches. Another interesting thing as well is that your Chiron is in challenging aspect to your Mars, which is the planet of like taking charge, and also the moon, which is the planet of emotion. So with having Chiron in challenging aspect to the Mars and the moon, that could make it naturally challenging for you to express your wants and need in a relationship. And so that's so interesting because you were mentioning before how that was one of the things that you learned about how to express your needs. Like, how can you expect somebody to meet your needs if you're not expressing them? So I find that really interesting.
It is interesting. And I think it was like for a long time, I didn't know how to, I think I expected the other person to just know, or when I did express my needs, it was kind of like, well, I can't do that. So, and then I would start to, kind of like, okay, either not express my needs or kind of like just accept less or settle for it. And I realize now that you can only do that so much, and then you start, like, resentment starts to build, and so I feel like that is what happened in past relationships. And so now I know that, I'm really grateful for the opportunity. While the heartbreak and the pain and the grief and all of that was hard to be in, but I'm really grateful for the opportunity to open up to see what it was I needed to learn, and to really change within myself, not because I was broken or there was something wrong with me, but just because this is the journey my soul was meant to take, and to be that much more in my truth and authenticity in relationships going forward. So like currently and going forward. So I feel like, that is, I'm just grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that stuck out to me just now from what you said is not because there was something broken within me, but because this is the journey that my soul needed to take or was meant to take. I think that's so powerful. And I think that's a lesson and a knowing that probably informs the work that we do, and also the work that so many people that help people in different ways, live by. In that, I think so many people, lots of people live their lives thinking I'm broken, like I'm defective in this area. That's why these things have happened to me. And it's kind of shifting that mindset. And we're going to get to shifting in a second with the shift, but shifting that mindset of, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means that, there's certain challenges that you have, and your soul, these things are happening to you, perhaps not because you're broken and there's no hope for you, but it's because your soul is meant to learn certain things and is meant to face certain challenges. And it's like, are you going to sit back and think you're broken for the rest of your life? Or are you going to stand up and learn and evolve and be your truest self? Because when things happen to you, a lot of times it's because life is calling you to be your most authentic self. And it's like, you got to pick yourself up and get going with that. But yeah, that's really interesting with the expressing needs. And that's something that I'm learning a lot in my life, especially recently. I feel like there's been a lot of tough aspects recently that's been affecting people's relationships. We're in retro shadow right now, currently, for the Mercury retrograde that's happening in Libra. So it's all about expressing needs and like exploring, what does that mean? Like, knowing that you have a right to express your needs, knowing how to ask for your needs. And I think a big lesson is kind of knowing, okay, if you know, you can't necessarily 100% fault somebody else for not meeting your needs if you're not expressing what those needs are. And
Yeah.
then on the flip side, knowing that you may express your needs and that other person may not be willing or able to meet them. So then what do, right? Do you shut down and not get your needs met? Or do you realize, you know what? My needs are still valid. So maybe this connection is not meant to be, whatever it is, whether it's friendship, romantic relationship, whatnot. If I'm not going to get my needs met, maybe that means that we're just both on different paths and it's just not a connection. Or maybe it means I need to reassess my needs. You know, there's so much that goes into that.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of the podcast that you are a part of, that you're a co-host of, The Shift, because recently the Shift has been having episodes about what does selfish mean, you know, redefining that, and also setting boundaries and kind of incorporating that into the definition of what is selfish. I personally love the Shift podcast. I try to listen to every episode as soon as it comes out. It's, you know, and it's so easy to listen to. It's 30 minutes and it's just really insightful information. So let's get to that now, because I definitely would want those listening today to learn more about the Shift, and perhaps tune in. So I'll include the links and details for that in the description of this episode. But yeah, you know, if you can, please describe the Shift and what's the idea behind that. And if possible, kind of giving a little more insight into the current series within the Shift that's happening, which is all about redefining selfish and setting boundaries.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And it's so funny. We segued into this with talking about meeting our needs, because that was literally our episode we recorded on Friday was what do you need? It was part 4 of our Reframing Selfish series, and diving deeper into boundaries and talking about what it is we need, understanding what we need, and having to, you know, understand it first. That's the first part. And then, so we need that so we can communicate it to others. And I feel like when we do that, we open the space, we make it more of a habit to, rather than keeping it to ourselves, we make it more of a habit to express it. And I think we're so afraid to express our needs because we're afraid of rejection, and we're afraid of projection from the other person, or defensiveness. And so, but that's why, you know, every time we have one of these conversations in this series, we're like reminded why we started this series, which was, you know, being selfish is not, it's there, you know, society puts this negative label on it because, and I feel like that's disempowering. We don't want to feel selfish for thinking about ourselves first, but ultimately we need to do that in order to be our full, we need, like they say, we need a full cup in order to pour from it. We can't pour from an empty cup. So if we are constantly worrying about, you know, meeting everyone else's needs before our own, we're going to end up in a place of depletion and, you know, low energy and just not being able to function. And so, yeah, now I just I was just thinking, your co-host Stella, her self-care, in tune with her own self-care, is like the perfect example of that. It's like, you don't want to let people down, but at the same time, you know, it's like, the more and more we model this with each other, the more a habit, or more this becomes our habit, versus trying to make everyone else happy and then feeling like, you know, empty and I can't even function now. So, and the Shift podcast is about redefining everything, like kind of you know, looking at things from a new perspective. We started this back in June. We just finished episode 8. And we're really taking a look at looking at things differently, different themes in our lives, belief systems, stuff that we kind of, you know, we go through the motions, and then we're like, why are we doing it? Why are we even still doing this? Like, does it even align with what I believe anymore? So, and then also, like, there's that part of it, but then also broadening our perspective that not like that we're all unique. We all have unique experiences. And just because I experience something one way doesn't mean that everybody does. And that, so when we go through life, you know, it's kind of opening ourselves up to maybe not everyone is having the same experience, and to just be mindful of that, and to not, you know, it's kind of, it might be contradicting to the selfish piece, but it's like that, I think not having the negative connotation around selfish is like what opens us up to be more confident in our, not confident in ourselves, but just have more integrity of spirit within ourselves, so that when we're operating, we're not operating from this wounded place all the time, and this like the place of ego and all of that stuff gets in the way of our relationships, or just, not relationships, I'm talking like just deep, intimate relationships, but like with the people we meet on the street or whatever. We just have a different way of being when we can open ourselves up to the fact that we're all unique, and that not everybody sees everything the same way or experiences it the same way. So that's, we're talking about stuff that sometimes is uncomfortable for people maybe to hear at times. I mean, but it's, they're necessary conversations. And I'm, again, grateful for the opportunity to do this. And I love communicating. So like once I start talking, I can't stop.
Yeah, which is great, because you have so much to say, so much perspective. And by you becoming a co-host of this podcast, The Shift, it's just been another outlet for you to utilize your abilities, your natural abilities in communication, and now doing it through a podcast, and in an audio format, as a podcast. And I love the concept of the shift, because it is shifting perceptions on certain things. And I've been loving the recent series with redefining selfish and setting boundaries. And I feel like that's especially so important for me, because I am a Libra sun. So I feel like I give and I give sometimes, and then I feel resentful. But then one thing I have to think about is, well, did the person really ask for everything that I was giving them? Why was I giving so much of myself? And then I'm expecting them to, be grateful, but they didn't really ask for everything that I was giving. So it's I feel like, it's so good that this topic has become such a series on the shift, because there's so much that could be explored when it comes to setting boundaries and being quote unquote selfish and meeting your own needs and all of that. I feel people are constantly having to learn that. And it's something that you don't learn in school, right? So as individuals, we become adults and we enter connections with other people and continue to have connection within ourselves. And we have no idea how to do any of those things, how to take care of ourselves and claim our boundaries.
Yeah, it's so true. We don't learn any of this in school. And that's why we're talking about this. Like there's so many things that can help us in life that we're not talking about, or we weren't taught when we were growing up. And so, but back to your meeting needs or the over giving or offering. And that's what one of the things we talked about on our last show was like, it's, we want to make it more normal to say, hey, this is what I need, instead of like, and for people not to take offense to that. Like the more we start to do that, the more comfortable we get. And that just becomes the way we're operating on it, day to day. And it's like, you almost have to say, hey, I'm going to share this with you, what's going on, but I'm just sharing to be heard. And, I just need to be heard. I don't need, because a lot of times in relationships, we think if we share something, we need the other person to fix, or the other person thinks we want them to fix it. And it's like, that's not we just need to be heard in the moment. So it's like, it works both ways in communicating those needs, and it just benefits everybody. So we're not done talking about it.
Oh, good, because I need as many lessons as possible. Yeah. And it's I think one question I have in my mind that's sort of come up in my life recently is like, is the other person responsible to ask the other individual what their needs are? Or is the person with the needs the one that's responsible to share, hey, these are my needs, and I'm noticing that this need isn't being met? I wonder about that. What are your thoughts on that? I know that's like going off on a tangent, but it's a question that
I don't know. Maybe you need to come on our show and
I know that'd be great.
Maybe we could do that too. Yeah. So, but that's so true too. Like, it's like, that's the other piece of it is, I think the answer is both. I think we need to be comfortable saying, I need this, but we also need to be comfortable asking the other person, hey, what do you need right now? If they're not saying it outright, I think, and it's not like it's all on one person, or, it's whose accountability. I think it's both parties. And the more, that's what my point is like, the more we do it, the more we practice it, the more others we're modeling it for other people. And then it becomes kind of just our new way of operating. And instead of like layering on expectation and assumption, and because that again gets us into trouble with our relationships, because then resentment builds. So
Mhm.
I think it's both. I think it's like having the awareness of, okay, next time I have like a deep conversation with somebody, I'm going to say, hey, what do you need from me right now? Like, I just want to understand. And I
Mhm.
think the person will appreciate it because you're being,
Mhm.
you're vulnerable, and then they're going to be vulnerable. And it's just like, it's a safer space.
Yeah, I think that's the key, vulnerability, because
Yeah.
I think when people come into a conversation with defensiveness, they're going to get defensiveness back because the
Right.
other person's going to be like, well, this person's being defensive. I'm not going to be vulnerable now. Right. And so
Right.
it just leads to nowhere. Whereas but the hardest part is the person initiating the conversation being vulnerable and knowing how to express it, how to express what they're saying in a way that will show vulnerability and bring forth vulnerability. And I think that's
Right.
really the key, how the conversation is started, and it having to show, not having to, but it would be ideal if it showed vulnerability because you're likely to get that back. But I think a lot of people have a hard time starting a conversation in a way that expresses vulnerability and openness. I think most people kind of start it being defensive, and then they get defensiveness back, and then they wonder, why am I getting defensiveness back? And it's like, well, that's kind of what you showed. So I mean, we can go on and on and on. And I would love to be on the shift. I think it's a great
Yeah.
podcast, and I think everybody should listen to it. It's phenomenal. I love it. But we've talked about pretty much all the different things, all the different major things that you have going on right now,
Yeah.
and have been able to tie it to your natal chart, which I think has been great. And that's really the purpose of these interviews that we're having on the Astro Read. We want to bring in people like yourself, Trish, that are doing amazing work, that are doing work that's helping people in different ways, and helping people live their most authentic lives, and really showing through the person's story and through the person's natal chart why that person, in this case you for this episode, why the person is meant to do what they do, right? Kind of showing it's no accident. Like it isn't,
Right.
like when the circumstances happen that have led you to do all the great work that you do, it probably feels like, oh, this just happened and it's fate and this and that. And it probably is, but there's also something within your being that's meant to create all the things that you're doing, whether it's your reiki and healing people and helping people manage their energy, or you're using your communication skills to write a book and to be a part of a podcast and to help people communicate better in their message with their brands,
Right.
or being able to use what you've learned in relationship challenges to help other people with their perception of relationships, whether it's through Love Me or the shift. All of this is kind of tied into your being and into your chart, and it just really shows that you are meant to do the work that you're doing right now. And it's great that you've been able to live your life and take everything that's happened to you and all the challenges to continue to live your life in the most authentic way possible, which probably has not been easy. And in doing so, you're helping so many people out there live their most authentic lives. And not only that, but you've opened the space for people to learn how to communicate in authentic ways as well, which I think is also really special.
Yeah. Thank you
So
for all of that.
yeah.
It's a great wrap up.
Yeah.
Would love to continue the conversation, but yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, that is, I mean, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm helping other people, like you said, live as authentically as they can and tap into the gifts that the whether it's creativity or whatever it is that we're meant to share here. We each have a soul that has a journey to take. So
Mhm.
and to live to that potential.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, all
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great wrap up too. And we'd love to have you back on maybe as Love Me gets closer to being released.
Mhm.
It'd be great to maybe have you back on, maybe read some excerpts of Love Me and really tie it into your journey and how it could help other people. So yeah, we'll definitely, be in touch for that. For
Yeah.
sure. So, I guess before we officially wrap up, feel free to share, how people can find out more about the great work that you do. I'll also make sure to include it in the description of this episode as well. But yeah,
Okay.
so feel free to share all of that.
Well, the easiest way to reach me is we just launched with the media group that I'm in. Well, we didn't launch yet, but I'm going to share it now. We're launching officially in October, but we have an app coming
Oh,
where we're on the
yeah.
KSMG media group app,
Mhm.
and it's available on Apple, Apple and or iTunes and Google Play,
Mhm.
which I can send you the link for that. And then so that's like a one-stop access for like all the ways to connect with me. You can find me on that app. Otherwise on my website, invibe.ca, and I'm always on Instagram too. So I'm at invibe.ca there as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, and yeah, thank you for having me. I
Mhm.
would love to come back, and I would love to have you on the shift as well. So
Okay. Yes, yes, and yes to all of those things.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Trish, for being a guest on the Astro Read. And it's such an honor to have you be our first interview guest, because you have set such a great tone for what these conversations can be and how insightful they can be. So thank you very much. And to everybody listening, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Feel free to, follow Trish and all the great work that she's doing through INVIBE and the shift. I think it'll be very helpful for you as you continue to live your most authentic life. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Astro Read. So in the meantime, take care.